Hello, and welcome to Notes 2.6, Dividing Fractions. Make sure you write down our two standards, NS 1.2 and AF 1.3. Our objective today is to divide fractions and mixed numbers. And our vocabulary is reciprocals, two non-zero numbers whose product is 1. So if you take a flat fraction and flip it over, you'll have the reciprocal. So our rule is dividing fractions, you multiply by its reciprocal. And the little phrase we say is skip, change, flip. Okay, so it's the same thing as skip, change, change, but you're changing the last one by flipping it. So if I have 3/8 divided by 4/5, I can change it by making that 3/8 times 5/4. So I've changed the division to multiplication and changed that second fraction to its reciprocal. Okay, let's take a look at teacher example 1. Dividing a fraction by a fraction. 9/10 divided by 3/20. Again, the first thing I do is skip, change, flip. 9/10 divided by 20/3. Now I can take a look at that fraction and see if there's anything I can cross cancel. And of course the 9 and the 3 are both divisible by 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 20 and 10 are both divided by 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1. 20 divided by 10 is 2. And I end up with 3 times 2 is 6. And that would be 6 over 1, but as we've talked about before, we don't need to write the 1 because it doesn't do any good. Okay, problem 2, 11/12 divided by -1/6. So remember, in 6th grade you spend a lot of time doing this, dividing fractions, but in 7th grade you do find that you have negatives in there. So, skip, change, flip, 11/12 divided by 6 over -1. Now, it's important to remember it doesn't matter where you put the negative as long as it's part of this fraction. Typically, you'll see I'll always write it first. Okay, so I'll keep it in the beginning. But I wanted to show you this way because a lot of students get confused if the 1 itself is negative or the 6, and it's the entire fraction that's negative. So you just need a negative somewhere in there. And already I know I've got one negative, and I'm doing division, so I'm looking at my sock rule. My socks don't match, so obviously my answer is going to be negative, no matter what I do. Okay, let's go ahead and cross cancel if we can. And notice we've got the 6 and the 12 are both divisible by 6. 12 divided by 6 is 2. 6 divided by 6 is 1. 11 times 1 is 11. 2 times -1 is -2. And again, I can put the negative sign wherever I want. My fraction is improper, so I do need to simplify. 2 goes into 11 5 times, with 1 left over. Now notice I write the negative first. Whenever you get to your final answer, you always want to have the negative in the beginning. And the reason why is if I had the negative between the 5 and the 1, it would look like 5 minus 1/2. So you want to be real careful there. Okay. Next problem is student practice. Go ahead, please simplify these fractions. Pause your video, press play when you're ready to begin. Okay, let's take a look and see how you did. Skip, change, flip. Then I can set up my fractions. I set it up this way. Obviously you wouldn't need to do this extra step at home because you'd write your fractions right side up. Since the computer makes them sideways, I wanted to rewrite it so it's easier for you to see. We can cross cancel there. They're both divisible by 3. 4 times -2 is -8, and 5 times 3 is 15. Okay, problem 2, skip, change, flip. And notice this time I kept the negative in the beginning, and again it doesn't matter where it happens as long as you have that negative. And already I can see I've got 2 negatives, so I know my answer is going to end up being positive. Now I set up my fractions vertically so it's easier to see. And I can see that 7 and 14 are both divisible by 7. My new fraction here, 5 times 2, -5 times -2 is positive 10. And 1 times 11 is 11. So go ahead and take a look. Make sure you correct any mistakes you had. And again, I would correct them in pen if I were you, so that you can use it as a tool later. Teacher example 2, dividing a fraction by an integer. So notice this time we have a number that is not a fraction. In this case, it's a whole number, but the reason why I say integer is that a whole number could be negative, which would be an integer. Okay, So, as we all know, 10 is the same thing as 10 over 1. So I can rewrite it as a fraction. Now I can skip, change, flip, and notice I set it up vertically right away. And 5 and 10 are both divisible by 2, or excuse me, by 5. Give me a 2 here and a 1 there. 1 times 1, of course, is 1. 8 times 2 is 16. And there's my completed answer. Okay, teacher example 3, same idea, but now we've got a mixed number. Here, if you take a look, remember with multiplying fractions, we couldn't multiply when they're mixed numbers. And that's the same thing with division, is you have to have improper fractions. So I can do 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9, 9 over 2, and 4 times 3 is 12. Sorry guys, that's the dog. I think she hears a bear. And 12 times 3 is 15. Remember what I talked about? You want to set the negative aside until you've finished making it improper. And the reason for that is you don't want to mix yourself up when you're adding after the multiplication. So eventually we have negative 15 over 4. Okay, now I can continue just as I did before. Skip, change, flip. And my numerators are 9 times negative 4. My denominator is 2 times 15. I want to look first and see if I can cross cancel, which of course I can. 9 and 15 are both divisible by 3. 2 and negative 4 are both divisible by 2. And then 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times 5 is 5. So I know I'm going to have an improper fraction, which means I need to turn it back into a mixed number. 5 goes into 6 once with 1 left over. Negative 1 and 1/5. Student practice 2 and 3, go ahead, find the quotient, and please simplify if possible. Okay, welcome back. Let's see how you did. Taking a look first, I have my improper fractions. Skip, change, flip. Cross cancel if possible. So now I have my new fractions, and I multiply across. Okay, problem number 4, same thing, make your fractions improper. Skip, change, flip. Cross cancel if possible. And notice here we can cross cancel both of them. And 54 and 27 are both divisible by 27. That might have been a tough one for you to pick up on. But if you used 9 first and then 3, or 3 first and then 3 and then 3 again, you'd still come up with the same answer. Here's our simplified fraction. Now notice I'm going to end up with an improper fraction with a denominator of 1, which tells me it's simply a whole number. And there you go. Okay. So let's take a look at our next teacher example. And we've got this, our last teacher example. This is tricky because it's simplifying an expression with fractions. It's actually not hard to do as long as you go step by step. So if I think back to PEMDAS, I know my order of operations is to do the operations within parentheses. Well, the only thing in parentheses are my fractions, and I don't want to turn them into decimals. So I move on to my exponents, which I see an exponent. Now, 3/4 squared means 3 squared and 4 squared. Or I could write two fractions that both are 3/4. It'd come out the same way. 3 squared means 3 times 3, which is 9. 4 squared means 4 times 4, which is 16. So I've evaluated the power and made a new fraction. Now, my grouping symbols, remember this bar right here is like a grouping symbol. You do everything in the numerator, then everything in the denominator, and then you can divide. So I take care of my numerator by multiplying these two fractions together. 3 times 9 is 27, 5 times 16 is 80. Now notice I've got 27 over 80 over 15 over 18. So I kind of have a fraction over a fraction, which is the same thing as saying a fraction divided by a fraction. So this here, this fraction bar is also a division bar. So I can skip the first fraction, change division to multiplication, and flip the second fraction. Skip, change, flip. Now I want to cross cancel if possible, and of course on both of these I can do so. I think that's a little hard to read. That's a 10. I kind of squashed it in there. Sorry, guys. 9 times 1 is 9, and 10 times 5 is 50. Nothing left to simplify, so I'm all finished there. Okay, taking a look at our final student practice, go ahead and do these quickly. Pause your video, press play when you're ready to begin. Okay, let's go ahead and go through these real quick. Hopefully you did them right. Of course, there's nothing to do in the numerator, so I need to start with the denominator, multiplying my fractions. Skip, change, flip. And cross cancel if possible. New fractions look like this, and I end up, of course, with just 2. Okay, here I see I have an exponent, so I need to take care of that first. 1 times 1 is 1. 5 times 5 is 25. Then I need to multiply my numerators together. Skip, change, flip. Cross cancel if possible. They're both divisible by 25. You can think of your quarters. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 16 is 64. That's a little cut off, I think, for you on the bottom, and that is 9 over 64 if you can't read that. Okay, good work there. We're now ready to go ahead and go on to the quiz. Okay, make sure you've taken a look at the quiz, copied it down. Do remember on Schoology the questions are in different orders, possibly slightly different questions, so make sure you check on Schoology and make sure you're doing the right question. Okay, have a great day.